This railroad, everything you see here was purchased for this place, from the locomotives to the machinery. And the fact that it is all still together in the home that all the stuff only ever knew is beyond remarkable. And so that, in and of itself, even if nothing ever moved, makes this hands down the most phenomenal historical site I think that we have, period. This isn't a recreation, this is a real deal. You know, a lot of stuff out there is like George Washington's hatchet, 5 new heads, 14 new handles. And compared to the East Broad Top, it's like this is George Washington, like in the flesh. You're standing in the middle of a shop complex that really shouldn't be here. It's really exciting. This has kind of been my professional home away from home, and probably my heart's been here more than any place else professionally. So it's going to be very difficult for me to stay seated, because I'm going to get real roochy, because I get really excited about this. I don't know of any other place in this country for sure, and probably in the world, where there is such a complete, intact industrial transportation complex that reflects early to mid 20th century America. The fact that it survived is phenomenal.
The East Broad Top Railroad was built from 1872 to 1874 to serve the big new Rock Hill Iron Furnace, which opened in 1876 across the Black Log Creek from the town of Orbisonia. The railroad was planned to bring iron ore from the Black Log Narrows and from west of Saltillo, and coal from mines on the Broad Top Mountain. They chose to build a narrow gauge line with rails just 3 feet apart instead of 4 feet 8.5 inches, so rails and bridges can be lighter and curves can be sharper. This let the railroad be built more cheaply. However, it also meant that the EBT could not exchange cars with other railroads. But labor was cheap then, and much of what the new railroad was expected to carry would be furnace materials traveling between points on the EBT. The main line of the new railroad stretched 11 miles south from Mount Union to Rock Hill. From there, the line curved west through Three Springs and Saltillo before beginning a steep climb that took it around sharp curves and through 2 tunnels to reach the mining town of Robertsdale, 18 miles from Rock Hill. In 1908, the Rock Hill furnace poured its last iron, and by the early 1950s, the EBT was the only American narrow gauge to survive east of Colorado. The EBT closed in early April of 1956 and was sold to a scrap dealer, Nick Kowalczyk. In August 1960, Orbisonia celebrated its bicentennial, and for the grand event, Nick Kowalczyk and the railroad's operating vice president, Roy Wilburn, agreed to run excursion trains. The excursions were a big success. Early in 2020, several railroad preservation advocates got together with some longtime EBT fans to create a nonprofit EBT foundation, which acquired the railroad and its shops and archives from Joe Kowalczyk, Nick's son. Since then, the foundation, assisted by generous grants and donations, has been hiring employees and partnering with the all-volunteer Friends of the East Broad Top to rehabilitate track and cars, overhaul steam locomotives, and restabilize buildings and shops. The tireless efforts to restore, preserve, interpret, and operate the famous EBT will sustain its legacy for generations to come.
There's a right way, a wrong way, and then there's the East Broad Top way, and that is the right way. Things haven't really changed much. In the late 70s, early 80s, you had 4 locomotives to choose from, and so on and so forth, which as the years wore on, and regulations being what they are, we wound up with only 1. So you saw a decline, but you were so involved you really didn't realize the decline. Prior to closing in 11, we had a lot of high points with the Thomas the Tank Engine being here and the Polar Express, and it showed us then what this property was capable of doing. We are capable of being a tourist attraction that's going to be outstanding compared to just maybe mediocre prior.
This space is the reason why I love trains. It's always been ingrained in me to have a fond interest in this place, and this place is really what got me into trains. Seeing steam locomotives and riding behind them as a little kid, all the way up until the time it's closed, and just seeing all the magnificent buildings here as a child, I was always impressed by that. Hearing the whistles echo through the valley, the whistle will always be ingrained in my memory. That to me is just the coolest thing that I remember from being a kid. Everyone involved here shares a common goal of just bringing the majesty and glory back to this place, and everyone treats you with respect and they look out for you, and it's great to be a part of that. I mean, it's just a great thing to have that in a place like this.
One of the beautiful things about trains, you form a community. Community here, and this place is unique, this county in a way. People here, I always have sensed a greater level of community here than most places I've been. I mean, heck, everybody knows everybody.
As far as a sense of community, the railroad, we'll just start with the local community. You know, this was a major employer for them up until 1956, and when it came back in 1960, brought a lot of tourism and stuff into the town, and so it's always just been a part of the fabric.
Everything was like one big family. I mean, that's just the way it was. I mean, everybody knew everyone else. And everybody was, friends, and it was just like one big community.
One of the great things about the East Broad Top is that it's known worldwide. And so the people part of it, just the massive amount of people who just love and are interested in this place. And it ranges from people who are just diehard railroad enthusiasts that just love it, the nuts and bolts of it, to the locals who grew up with it and are excited to see it come back. And so to me, the most rewarding thing is being able to be a part of bringing that back and preserving it for the people that just appreciate it, but also what we can do to share that with people who wouldn't necessarily know anything about it. I guess that's probably the most rewarding thing, is being able to preserve something that was thought to be dead and has now got new life ahead of it.
The reopening of the East Broad Top is a dream come true. The Friends organization has worked for many years to keep the roofs from leaking and the windows from breaking, knowing that at some point there was going to be a bright future for the railroad. We didn't know what that future was, but it was our job to keep the railroad intact until that future arrived. And finally in 2020, the future became apparent, and it's a very positive, very exciting future for the railroad. So it's a dream come true.
When the railroad announced to the general public that it was going to reopen, that was just a wonderful, wonderful day, because I'd hoped and prayed for that day for many years, along with everybody else.
I never in my lifetime thought that anything was going to happen like it is now. And over the last 6 months, things have just turned around completely 100%. And the work that's getting done and that, we've got a lot of different people that's come in and put their time in, and it's not costing the company. They're doing all this volunteering along with the guys that are working here, and things are going so great. But like I said, I never thought I'd see this, and hopefully see a lot more over the next year, 2 years to reopen more of the line.
So now we have this opportunity, this phenomenal opportunity, where we've got a group of people who have taken the place over. The idea is bring it back. And so the first thing was to assemble a group of people, and they've got a fantastic group of people that came up with this idea and then came up with the money. And I'm not going to name names because I know I'll miss somebody, and then somebody will get mad at me. But it's a great group of people, and I'm very fortunate to have been asked to participate in this. And the intent is, we will be able to use this stuff. It wouldn't get used that often, hopefully, because you don't use that stuff for that often, that you have to work on wheels. But we will be able to work on driving wheels here in this shop with the original equipment. So whenever you're in preserving history, so to speak, are you trying to cast this thing in amber where it becomes that is it, that's exactly it, that's 100%, but it's hands off, it's sterile, you can't touch it, hear it, smell it, anything? Or do you make it go? And if you make it go, then you're going to sacrifice a certain amount of historic fabric. Bearing wears out, this, that, or the other thing breaks. So I think the goal here is to strike a balance. Try to preserve as much historic fabric as possible and still maintain a safe operation. Limit the amount of wear and replacement, but use the stuff. There are very few things in the world that are as dead as a steam locomotive without steam in it, or as alive as a steam locomotive with steam in it. I mean, when you're next to a steam locomotive, even when she's sleeping, she'll be making little noises. You know, there's steam coming out here and there, and then there'll be a little expansion, and it's like, you know, creaking the bones and what have you. And the thing about it is that locomotive, all you have to do is get up in the cab, pull the throttle, and away you go. Now, if you didn't start the air compressor, you may have a problem in getting stopped. But the point is, that thing's alive even when it's sleeping. And that's one of the beauties of steam locomotives, and they're so quiet. Now, they're very noisy when they're working hard, but when they ease out at the roundhouse, if you've blown out the cylinder cocks and you don't have to have them blasting steam, you know, they'll sneak around. They'll tiptoe around. I mean, you could have one of these things, you know, 75 tons come up behind you, and you wouldn't even know it. It would just be, and all of a sudden you turn around and here's this thing looking at you. They're so cool. But that's a whole other thing. So, at any rate, that's it.
Sounds good.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
Sweet.
I loved the last part.
Yeah, me too.